right. So today's focus is going to be on Parse, and we're going to lightly touch on Parse. We're going to learn how to create users and create tables on the cloud. So essentially, after today, we should be able to make all of our apps social. Now, there's a few things to keep in mind with Parse, but before we get into that, I'm going to give you a bit of a preface on how we're going to structure today. So I had initially already built an app that we generally use in class, and I actually built this just 8 months ago, before our previous class, and Parse API already changed. Not drastically, but it did change. So I started to redo it, but then I thought, you know what, it would be actually a really good lesson if we broke down the thing together and maybe even totally change my idea to something else, if you guys are up for it, and go through breaking it up, creating the tables, and recalling and saving the information. And go through the documentation as well. Like at this point, I'd like to get a lot more comfortable with basically taking on any framework and reading documentation and being able to apply it from documentation, right? Because we do have those fundamentals. So I'd like us to start getting a lot more comfortable with that. So I thought there'll be value in me going, like, leading you guys to read documentation and start applying everything together. Now, with Parse, the documentation is really, really good. So it's a great starting point. And that's why I kind of felt comfortable doing this as well. You know, it's not going to be struggling and testing things back and forth, I hope, because it's only gotten better the past few months. So I think it'll be fun for you to do that. Now, my idea is, I don't know if you guys jumped on the iPhone bandwagon like the first few months the iPhone was out in the market, but like one of the most popular apps was essentially like those anonymous walls, right? Where you would log in and you just like leave comments just anywhere in the world, right? And some of them were tagged by location, some of them were just like free for all like walls, right? Basically what the internet was a few decades ago. So I thought that would be a good exercise to start with, but I'm up for discussion if we have something on the same level. If you guys had any ideas for like secondary apps you'd like to go with. Nothing jumps to mind, I'll go with this.
What do you mean secondary apps?
Like to your funnel app or something close to it. I don't want to give anybody answers to the funnel app to this exercise. But if you had like a similar concept or a secondary final project idea that you were thinking about that you didn't go with, we could potentially build a data model for that instead of your final project. No? No?
I have an idea, but I don't think it's.
What's your idea?
It's
gotta be simple.
Okay, forget it.
I like one of Keith's ideas, like his like second or third one or something like that.
Which one?
I remember nothing about it. I just remember that
It's a good idea.
The debate one? There was one on debate, there was one on the phone call.
But the debate one involved videos. So
Yeah, that's the one you're doing now for your final.
Yeah, debate, and then there was another one with YouTube, like karaoke.
But that one's good.
Yeah.
But that requires audio, and like let's work with data types that we've worked with so far. We haven't covered audio. That's AV Foundation. It won't be for a couple of weeks.
I had one idea where a student in college that says sophomore can trade books with a freshman for classes that overlap.
Okay.
I guess it would take the ISBN code from Library of Congress, but it would have a database internally of the books that are available and student information.
Okay.
But I have no idea how I would do that.
Okay, that's actually not bad. I'm gonna simplify it a bit more. Did you read Trick?
Well, I was just thinking, like, I do like diversity recruiting on the side at work, and so I thought it would be like a good app would be to connect candidates who are trying to find someone to talk to at work with people who are willing to talk. So like you could search the profiles of the people who are willing to talk about the company, and then I don't know if you either book an appointment with them or you just send them a message to see when they're available.
Okay, interesting. That's actually a good one. We can't do the whole thing if you don't mind doing that one, because what we can do. Um, So users who log in are both recruiters as well as people looking for jobs.
I think mainly the login people would be the looking for jobs,
Okay.
and then you would have the database of people who are willing to talk.
Okay. So just jobs and people looking for jobs.
Yeah, I mean, not even jobs. It could just be people who do jobs. So like,
Okay.
yeah. Just
Okay.
like I want to learn about development, so I'm going to look for someone who went to my school
Okay.
that does development.
Now there's a third user who would enter those jobs, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So maybe we can create just one of the users today. So we'll make the assumption that all users are people looking for jobs. And then we'll have just our own interface where, because it's not fleshed out yet, where we just enter our own jobs, right? So yeah, let's go for that. Let's make it so all users can search for jobs, and jobs have certain parameters, right? So let's talk this out. Let's build out the database together, and then we'll jump into parse. So we have our jobs table, right? And what's the information we need from jobs?
Job title, location.
Title. That'll be a string, right? Location. For now, do you want to make location a string, and then later we'll make search by, because parse has a cool data type, which is kind of a spatial, a geolocation data type. So we can actually store latitude and longitude, right? And I think Mondays, next class, we're gonna go over getting latitude and longitude and working with directions. So you can flesh that more, but for now, just make location string. We can make it like a zip code or city town. I think city state, right? String, go city state format. And there's no way for us to enforce this yet, so this will be one of those loosey goosey things.
Would you make it two? It seems like you sometimes want that, but you want it two.
So like city and state.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun. So city, state.
Put salary, so we have a number to work.
Yeah.
Years of experience required.
So what?
Years of experience required.
Years of experience. And then let's do one more description. Salary is an integer. User experience, integer. Description will be a text. It'll be more than just a string, right? Okay. And then the people looking for jobs, we'll just call these users for now. They'll have what, first, last, what else? City, state. State. So we'll just have all the strings. Okay. It's good for now, right? So this will at least allow us to do this. And then if we have time, which honestly I don't think we'll have today, we can choose whether or not we want to finish this next class, or we can finish it up and we can just go over the solution. We can create another table for favorited jobs or applied jobs. This probably also needs some kind of content information, right? If we work with Edger's book, we can maybe learn to get in there. But the thing is, it's a good baseline. It's a good MVP for us to start building on top of. At least we can do the search functionality, right? Cool. So as far as our app goes, let's draw this out. We need to have at least 3 screens I can think of, right? So what's the first screen? Login, register. So we need what? Just username and password.
Or to sign up.
So we already need username and password, right? These are both strings. Username, password, login, or register, right? This one we'll have, and most likely, guys, we'll what we'll do is we'll establish a connection of logging in and registering, and then over here establish a connection of searching. We might not get the time to display everything in a pretty way in this view. You guys should be able at this point to do that, depending on how much time you get, or if you get stuck anywhere. But this will be then kind of the search box, right? The search. And then results, maybe we can do this on the same page or make it the next page. For now, just do a search with a search button. And I think realistically for today, we'll get to getting the search result and it's displaying in print console, right? Because this will give us the flow of being able to register and get to this screen. And this screen, let's make it functional so we can do stuff. And actually, let's add one more screen. Let's add a screen just for admin. So this will be just for, while we have an MVP for us to test with. Let's do a button here, which is admin. And this should just be a login. And in a real product, we would actually have a user type of admin, which would take us to the third screen, which will be, add job. And then here we'll have all the job fields. So we'll get to this part today. So this will be our admin interface, which in a Flashlight product we'll have to remove, right? But I'll just make it so we know how to feed the data to the jobs database from here. Cool? This is a good start.
So with your search, where would the results be displayed in?
Huh?
Where would your search results be displayed?
So ideally a table, right? A table view. But I don't think we're gonna have time to do it today. So we'll display them console.
Okay. Console?
On the debug field.
Oh, it's there. Okay.
And from that point, you guys should be able to put this in a table. Cool.
All right, I'll take care of the UI.
This is going to be a very ugly product. So this is MVP, get functionality working, and then get the UI working, right? So Parse, let's actually take a step back before we jump on there. Parse basically allows us exactly the same format that we had for core data entities and attributes. It works in the same way, right? It's a relational database, and it's very similar to SQL. They've kind of got their own format of pulling and entering data, but it works exactly the same way. And when we work with databases, it's really, just like with anything we do in any kind of data we have in our iOS apps, we have basic CRUD functionality, right? We can create, we can read data, we can update data, and we can remove data, right? So no matter what, whenever you're working with any database, Parse included, it's always CRUD. If you get lost, just remember, if you need to find something, search one of those keywords, and you'll find a way to go on, right?
Is there a way with Parse to just like mass upload data? Like just like upload?
So Parse is just an API to use the data. So what you can do is you can have a data set, and you can write your own logic to go through it and push the Parse quickly. You can have like a loop to go through data and parse it.
Got it.
I think they actually do have an upload CSV option.
Okay.
And if not, I'm sure someone's built something. It's pretty easy to do that.
Okay.
So
Great.
that's a problem that, it's not a problem. It's a request that any app needs, right? Is to like dump data so you can test it, right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry to ask this question, but have you said what Parse is, like at a high level for?
Yeah, I think I have, but we can take a step back. That's a good point. So essentially, any app that has a shared database where multiple people need to share that information or push information to each other, the data needs to sit in the cloud, right? Because right now, all of our data so far has been sitting on our phones, right? So for you to build your foot track app, you can't work on data on your phone because someone else has access to the same data, right? So usually you have to spend a lot of money to hire developers to build your backend business logic, to store the data, pull the data, create an API for the data, right? Parse basically gives you raw access to those database tables and gives you an API to talk to them.
Who are those database tables? Where are they hanging out?
Facebook service. It's owned by Facebook.
Oh, Facebook does.
Yeah.
What's the name of the company? Parse, or it's just Parse is a method.
Parse is the name of the company that was purchased by Facebook. So they're still operating quite independently, but they're owned by Facebook. And we get a lot of influence from Facebook.
So, but they're Parse servers. 'Cause
Yeah,
that's
Parse
what
slash
somebody-
Facebook. Yeah,
Yeah.
they share those servers.
Great idea.
Right. I'm excited for this. I think
Yeah, and there's competing technologies. Firebase is another one that I've used quite a bit. Parse is, I mean, they both give you real-time data exchanges, and you don't only have to use iOS to build off this database. You can actually do the web technologies as well. You can do it web, Android, and they have quite comprehensive guides for every platform.
So we could create a web input.
Yeah.
page.
Exactly. Exactly. This is the cool thing about it, that you don't, they take care of the whole API layer for you. Now I've built production ready apps with Parse, but none of those production ready apps really ever hit over a few 100,000 users. So I haven't personally had experience on scale, but I've read that sometimes on scale it tends to have problems. But if you get to that level anyway, you can hire those developers to build your own infrastructure. So in my opinion, if your core competency is mobile development, then I wouldn't waste my money on. And I have a backend developer background, so that's actually what I'm hired for most of the time. I wouldn't spend that money if your app is going to be mobile. Then when you get to the scale, then you can spend the money and build your own infrastructure.
Or get bought by Facebook.
Or get bought by Facebook. Yeah, right. And the cool thing is, you don't really have to worry about one of the biggest worries when you build apps that get lots of traffic, if it gets picked up by a mass publication, is your app will still work, but because it's getting so many requests, your custom backend, very often it might crash. That's why apps that are on the rise, they have crash problems all the time. Like Twitter, I don't know if you guys, how long you've been on Twitter, but a few years ago, like 5 years ago, fail whale was a big known thing, right? Because Twitter was exploding so rapidly, they were constantly, crashing servers. So a lot of that kind of gets taken care of for you. But when you start having to work with scale problems, you probably want to move away from it. But up until the point of, mass users, it's not, it's a great solution. Any questions so far?
How many users is it mass users in these parts? Ballpark figure.
I mean, so they say that there's no limit, and this answer will change every year because the way applications get interacted with, the API will change, the technology will change. So this answer will not be the same.
Okay.
But I mean, this is all speculation. I've never had an app in production with Parse that's gone over, a couple hundred K, but I haven't had problems with that.
Okay.
So that's my experience. From other people's experiences, I've read on forums that, granted, this is when I was looking into it, over a year ago, people with 100K visitors were hitting problems. I didn't when I was at mass traffic time, but that's kind of one of the examples. You don't have as much control on the back end, but they've got enough mass and scale at this point that I think even over 100K users will be okay. But it's also difficult to answer because it's not just 100K users, right? It depends how many interaction points your app has, right? If your users only every once in a while push information, it's probably fine. But if you have 5,000 users and they're sending and getting requests all the time, which again is not good for the data, but just make a point here, that they might cause more trouble than 100K users, right? So it depends on the nature of the interaction as well.
Sweet. Let's build something.
Yeah, let's build something. One more note. So we went over CocoaPods last time. You guys feel pretty comfortable with that? Got it down? Cool.
We need some practice. I would need some practice.
Yeah, I mean, over the weekend, start installing, like look up CocoaPods and like start playing around with them.
Okay.
I highly encourage that. There's another mechanism called Carthage, which is a little similar. And then there's the manual way, literally drag and dropping it, hooking it up to the framework. So Parse, we can do it from CocoaPods. The directions they give us, which are quite thorough, are the manual way of drag and dropping the folder. So we're gonna go that route today. It's quite easy. Instructions are spelled out. Just another way of going about it.
Drag and dropping instead of doing terminal.
Cool. So let's get started. So go to parse.com and create an account. And after you have your account, we're going to create a new app. What are we going to call this? Job Finder without the E. Finder.
And select the product.
The product we're going to use. So they own a few products. Core is the one that has the data. They have an analytics platform. And they also have a push platform. So one thing to note is whenever you have a big social network, right? And an event happens that's related to me, like someone sends me a message. For me to be notified that I'm getting a message without logging to the app, I've got to send a push notification. And doing that logic is one of the biggest pains in the asses still. So that's one of the services they offer us is a push logic. That's what I actually started using them, and I knew them in the first place before they got bought out. And I started using the Core product. But Core is the one we're going to be working with.
What were we supposed to name our first app?
I called it Job Finder.
Did it only let you make one?
No, you can have multiple. And check the core product. Click the core product, and you should come to this screen, which is essentially the core product starting screen. Are we all here?
Yep.
All right. And you guys should like pair up just so we can move faster. So like if someone gets stuck somewhere, you can help. Please, thank you. Now, in core data, our classes, each table was called a what? Entity, right? So entity was each one of our tables or classes, right? In Parse, they're actually called classes. And then each property in our table / entities was called a what? Attribute. Here, it's a column, like a database column. And this is a much more universal term for those subject matters because Parse is a universal product, and entity and attributes are iOS specific. So, class is actually kind of its own. It's a table, so it's a Parse term, but our model should be classes, right? So class is kind of appropriate. So it's as easy as selecting add class. We'll create our first. We'll create the logic that we have on the board.
Make it a product.
Let's make it custom. And we will call this jobs. And now we can go down the list. So select on add column plus column. We have title, and that one is a string. We have city, also a string.
Wait, how come? What do we? Oh, never mind.
The plus column.
Awesome.
Like, you guys don't understand how much work this usually takes to create.
This is awesome.
All right,
Back end for dummies. I love it.
We credit plus column.
no, I'm not. I'm even on the first. Like, all right, so I had a quick add class here, and then here we create some class names.
Yeah, so this one is going to be jobs. So jobs.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So let's go ahead and add all those fields. So city, state, also a string.
You try to avoid doing like a space, right? So like
No spaces. If you add spaces, either camel case or underscore. Yeah.
you're doing them lowercase, all lowercase.
Yeah, I'm doing all lowercase unless it's 2 words. Then I'll use camel case. I'm just following Parse's example because if you look at the create and update that, their format is camel case. So I'm just taking their format. It's not required by any means. It's just nice to have things in a uniform way.
You edit them?
You can, yeah. You should be able to.
There's no option for text.
For text, you're in the description?
Yeah.
Let's see. Number, string.
Yeah.
I guess not. Let's go with just a string.
Yeah.
And let's call it description. Okay, description. Did we get that? Oh, it's back here. Okay.
You can edit columns, or
You should be able to edit columns.
They only have string. They don't have.
Yeah, just use string. They don't have text field. I don't know if I made that up or if that was never there. Okay, so description. Yeah, I guess you can't. Salary is an integer. Number. We have
Delete column. Delete.
experience. So for the experience field, I'm calling it experience. And I'll make that a number. So make sure that if your fields are named differently than mine, when we work with them in our iOS API, to not just copy them verbatim. So state, description, salary, experience, title. I think that's good. Okay, let's add the next class. So we'll make this a user class. Oh, whoa. So this is a user class. And it doesn't ask us for the name because it by default names it user. The cool thing is that Parse even gives us an authentication system, so we don't have to worry about hashing usernames, hashing passwords, remembering users, and like encrypting all the information. Parse does all of it for us. Again, like weeks worth of work.
As long as it's in the password field.
Mm-hmm. It hashes the password for us. So, so our users table comes with a few things already created for us. So we don't have to create a password, and we don't have to create a username. So we just need a first, last, city, and state. So we can add columns to this as well. So first, and I'll call this first name.
Do
Okay.
you want to create a user that doesn't have a password? Should you not use this, or can you just disable the password until you need it?
You can disable the password until you need it. But you've got to handle the flow yourself then. Okay, so string, first name, and then last name is also a string. And city, also a string. And state is also a string.
What was your reaction when you first learned about this? Did you go like crazy, ecstatic, happy?
I was like, crap, I'm gonna be out of a job for backend development. But no, I'm not. Because as great as it is to build products that I charge for, which are pretty complex stuff, it needs a lot more control than this gives. But for something, you know, if you're a startup and quickly need to get a product with minimum features at the door, it's great. It's a different job to be done. But I think it's awesome. I can prototype very quickly. Like, I have no problem, you know, cannibalizing that part of my job. Because I could do more than that.
I don't want to take the backend course in DA anymore.
Yeah, right.
Well, you still have to learn how to build web apps.
The what?
Web applications.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the web is not dead. So
I thought that was funny.
no, backend Rails is also web. Well, you can build backends for any kind of app, but you still, you know, if you want to build a web app, then you've got to pick a framework to do that with. Okay, so let's switch to our jobs class really quick. Now, it allows us the capability to also feed information ourselves manually through here. So you can add row, and a row is essentially an object, right? So let's just try it. So I'll call this iOS developer, city, Arlington, state, VA, description, you must be badass iOS dev, okay? Salary, 100K, experience, 3 years. Good. So
jobs.
you'll see that by default, when we added our manual row, our manual object, it has an object ID. Remember we were talking about core data, everything is an ID automatically. Same concept here. It also gave us the nice functionality of having a create an updated ad field, right? So we know when this post was created and updated. So every time we make a change to this field, the updated column here will also get updated automatically.
Did you put anything for description?
I did. Just have fun with it.
Okay.
Well, you can move columns around too.
Yeah. It doesn't change anything in your app because your columns are just little columns. It just makes them easier for you to organize your information. All right. So I'm gonna leave this tab open, and in a new tab, I'm gonna command click and go into Docs, so we can refer to the documentation.
Any tab?
Huh? In a new tab, yeah. So I want us to reference this. So when we start interfacing with the data, we can actually see live what's going on.
So you open user in the new tab.
I open Docs in a new tab. Yeah. So Docs is up here on the. Yeah, guys, this is like super powerful. Like, if you took this technology back like 10 years ago, you could have done so much damage. Okay, so this gives you a pretty good idea of like the plethora of frameworks that Parse supports out of the box, right? It's all data, so if it's something not supported, you can build it yourself easily. But like these are all really, really, really comprehensive guides for any platform. So say your mobile app's a hit and your users are demanding a web app, you can easily spin up a web app sharing the data, and it gives you great directions to do that, right? Same for taking your data, your platform to Android. It's super robust. So basically, it gives us an API out of the box. So we'll of course go with iOS, and we'll go to guide. So this is our awesome get it started guide. So we'll go to quick start. So everybody here? And then our product is going to be data. And then again, it gives you more options. So mobile, iOS, Swift. Now, if you start researching online, does anybody know what Xamarin is? Xamarin is an Objective-C tool that basically lets you build your app in Objective-C, and it compiles to iOS and Android. Not the biggest fan, but you know, if Objective-C is your language, it's a good choice. So we went with Swift, and there's two options. It gives us a new project that we can just open and start working on, or it gives directions to integrate Parse to our existing project. New project is faster. Existing project might be useful for us to learn how to integrate it to our current projects. Do you guys have anything you might want to integrate it that you already have right now? Okay, let's take the easier route today and create a new project just so we can discover more features and interact with it more. And really, the guide on existing project is super, super robust and easy. Even if you actually didn't know much Xcode, you could follow it. So I'm not too worried about going straight to new projects. So we'll shave off like 15 minutes in class, so we can focus on the fun stuff. So we'll go to new project, and it'll just give us a download project. So let's download this.
Does it matter which one you do it to?
What do you mean?
Like at the top right, it says Job Finder via sample.
Yeah, it does, because it has the key already embedded in there. So I'll go with Job Finder. Thank you for pointing that out. Okay.
This Parse is startup.
It was a startup until it got bought by Facebook. But I think they already got like a couple rounds of funding before that. Okay, so it gave us two projects for some reason. So the one we're gonna work off is the one that says Swift. All right. So we have our main controller. So a few things to note. You'll see that if you open up your frameworks group, there's a few frameworks already added in there. So if you had started your own project, basically one of the steps you would have to do was drag and drop the Parse frameworks to our project. Let me update the preferences here. All right. All right. So by default, you'll see that the parse already added a few convenience methods for us in our app delegate. So first of all, another piece of logic that we had to do was, remember how we were talking about networking, and we would have to handle all the different scenarios of users interacting with their apps if there was no network coverage, right? Say all of a sudden the user's network coverage dies, and believe it or not, even in very robust areas with lots of towers, even though we don't lose connection all the time, we might drop our connection for a split second, right? So that could be a split second that we send data or receive data. So the cool thing about Parse is it also has a local layer in our own apps. So if we don't have a connection to the network, it stores that information in our local layer and then pushes it out later. So that's logic we would have to do ourselves that it does automatically. So again, tons of convenience methods.
In temporary files or data were stored?
That's a good question. I don't have an accurate answer for that. They have their own way of storing data. Probably, I would have to check that. I'm not sure. That's a good question.
Yeah. That's fine. We're just accessing parts every time we need to work.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about that. Yeah. Now it also gives us, the starter framework also gives us the commented out fields that we need to add our application information, right? So to make the connection to the database we created, we have to enter an API key and a secret key. So if you comment out the parse.setApplicationID, and then go back to our download, let's add these to our project.
The app delegate.
Yeah, so you should see this commented out, parse.setApplicationID. And after you have that, just build out your project, run it, so you can see if it runs. Build succeeded, so far so good.
Where do we find the application ID?
Yep. Yeah, so see, like, Parse is super, super document friendly, right? And it also gives directions for, if you want to use CocoaPods to install it in our projects, it gives directions for that as well.
Do you want to enable crash reporting?
If you want.
I'm gonna go back to. I can copy and paste it. I copy and paste it.
Would that give me an error message?
What's the error message?
Use of unresolved
So
identifier
uncurrent
parse
first times dot set application ID, because you have the whole thing with the button. Yeah, that one. Just
You might have to enter.
right now, I have to do is set comment. Just comment out one or other the other one. Okay. There.
Oh, you might have to, yeah.
That was that needed to be uncomfortable.
Yeah. The starter project is giving me a display class. Are any of you guys getting this for the starter project? The frame error?
Once you run it.
Yeah. It's okay. It's not a big issue. It basically, there's something wrong in where my screen is not full screen. It's having a problem in window frame. I'm not going to worry about it right now. Unless there's a low-hanging fruit here. Okay. Quickly check something in my view here. Okay, I'm not gonna worry about it right now. So let's first build our logic to be able to pull jobs. So I think the easier part before we get in with user registration and user logins is just to get in the habit of being able to pull and save information, right? So let's do that first. Then we'll get to the users and adding a registration screen before the job screen, right? So I'm going to start with just adding the fields we need for our, actually, let's just go straight to our view controller, right? Because we're going to do this from console to start out, just test out things. So view controller, we can start right from here, view to load. Then we'll have to refactor as we see fit.
Is it generally good to start, if you're going to use Parse to start the project with their starter project? Or?
I usually don't. This is actually the first time I've done that, but I wanted us to get a bit further along. So I went this route, which might bite me in the ass because my view is messed up now. I like to have more control, so I don't have a problem with spending a few minutes and doing that myself, 5 minutes. Cool. Everybody here?
Did you delete all the comments?
I'll do what?
Yeah.
Oh, never mind.
Let's follow directions for writing data. So it gives us a really cool method of testing things out. So we don't have to worry about writing our own classes, right? So let's quickly add this in our view controller just to make sure the connection with Parse is established. So copy paste this block of code here in our view controller. And you'll see that this is a Swift 1.2 version because of the print line of the print. So on our project, object saved. Now, let's test this. And it tells us that our object has been created. Right. Let's quickly go back in our classes view, where we can view all of our classes. So you'll see this test object table class here, right? We didn't add this ourselves, right? So with Parse, when we tell it to create something, where we tell it to interact with the class, if the class or the attribute does not exist, it writes it for us. So this is an important fact to know, that if the class we're pulling from or querying does not already exist, it will create it for us. Same thing as if we already have a class that exists, and we try to interact with a column that does not exist, it creates it for us.
Is this like this isn't JSON? Is this anything? This format?
Which format?
This format?
Right here?
Yeah,
That's JSON.
that is JSON.
Yep. Yeah. So the cool thing that Parse does is it also forgoes the step of us having to convert that. it gives us back an object. So we can start interacting with it right away.
No wonder you thought you were out of a job.
Huh? You're right. So again, a developer would have had to format this manually, right? So I'm gonna go back in this tab, and I like having a clean database. So I'm just gonna remove this table class. So if you click into the test object and go to more, where is the option delete here?
Drop class.
Drop class, where's that?
Under more.
Ah, thank you. Yep, more drop class. And type in the name of the object, or table rather. Cool. So let's not do it again.
If I don't have the test object there, then that's something.
It means that, did you run your project after you added this distributed load? That's a problem then.
Where's your read load for the user code?
Maybe didn't run.
Oh, you refresh. Right. I would select here.
Okay, so before we start working with Parse, let's quickly break down this query, right? So we don't want to run this again because it's creating a test object, but there's a few requirements here that are pretty much universal to work with Parse. Number one, every class, view controller, model, whatever, that we use to interact with Parse, we of course have to import Parse, right? We include the project in our frameworks, but it's not enough. We have to import Parse into the class we're working with it. So every time we work with Parse, we work with a PF object, a Parse object. And the requirements are we give it a class name of a table that usually exists, right, or doesn't if we're going to create them. And we can modify our attributes or our columns, right, by just accessing them as a dictionary format. So we access them by the object that we queried, and access the attribute by a string format as a key, right? So exactly the same as dictionary, right? Everyone's familiar with this format right here. After we've changed our data for the object, so we can do test object to is bar, test object name is Teddy, test object city is Washington, etc., etc. After we have all the information in, then we save it. And again, the cool thing with Parse is it doesn't block our view. It saves in the background, right? So after the object gets saved, if it gets saved, we then have the ability, we see again, the void in, right? Our anonymous function here. Our ability to update our UI, right? So again, feedback to user, they add some information, it gets saved. If it gets saved, we can, pop up an alert or give some kind of feedback that says, hey, successfully saved. Or if not, we can access our error and do if error, right? If error doesn't equal nil, save in the user, right? So I'm going to comment this out just so we can reference it. Let's go back to the documentation. So first thing we're going to do is let's see how we can read data. So let's interact with our jobs table. So going back to the right tab, if you scroll down after this first step, let's go into dive into our documentation. And we're going to have to go iOS, and then from iOS, go to API reference. Actually, that's not right. Let me go back. Where was the guide that I wanted?
Saving objects. If you scroll down.
Getting started. Actually, that's where I want to be. So under the guide, under the guide, they have our left menu bar. This is the easiest and best way to interact with it. After you get familiar with this, then you can access the API. So under getting started, first thing we're gonna work with is objects and queries, right? So as I mentioned, PF objects are what we interact with. So every time we save or fetch a request from Parse, we interact with PF object, right? So we're first going to work with retrieving objects. And every part of our iOS Parse documentation has a Objective-C and Swift version, which is really nice. So let's go ahead and take this first query here, add it to our project. Take a step back here.
Did you put it inside the view controller? Or is it
Yeah, we're gonna do everything inside the view control for now.
Sorry, and did you put it in the view load?
View load, yep. And there's actually a better, more verbose query. Let's actually, if you go into queries and go to basic query, let's actually take this segment of code because it gives us a bit more explicit directions on how to interact with our objects.
Where is it?
So under queries,
yeah.
Basic queries.
Okay. The first one?
Yep. Okay, so again, a PF query is the first thing we work with. So we're gonna build a query, and first part of a query is we get the class name, and then just like with core data, we enter information with the filter by, right? Query by.
I'm having problems with my internet connection. What are you guys connected to? 1776 guest date?
I am under GA guest.
Yeah, yes.
Because my, all right, let me switch real quick.
So our class name is jobs, right? Now, we can filter the results. I'm gonna choose not to. I'm gonna pull everything. So for now, I'm gonna comment out the where key. And this will be very useful for us to reference in our search, right? Because essentially, our search filter becomes the where key is the job title, and we can make that like whatever we enter in there, right? So this should be enough for us to quickly see if we get anything back from our jobs class, right? So if you run this really quickly.
We copied only the first one out of queries, basic queries, right?
Yep. So there it is.
Oh, down there.
I got it there.
Successfully retrieved one score.
Yep. closing your. Yeah, I think that was it. You're missing that. So let's quickly add something else in our backend, just so you can see if we can get more than one. So if you go to jobs, I'm just gonna create a new row for us to test with. So I'll call this Rails developer. City. DC. Description. Ninjas required. Salary. 90K. Experience. 5 years. Cool. So after you add that row, let's rerun our application and see if it gets 2 scores back. Yep. And then the score is just because their example on the documentation was with the game scores, right? Because our logic here says scores, so you could say jobs instead of scores. So let's digest this in a second after you guys run this. So essentially, what gets returned after do our query is an array of objects, right? And over here is we have title and all the fields that we added, right? So regardless of whether it's one or many, we get an array of objects. Right? And then we can access the properties of those objects from there, right? So right now what we're printing out is object ID. So let's just say, let's change our logic here to quickly make this a bit more semantic. So we'll call this not object but jobs. Objects. And run this, and then we'll go through everything that's happening in order. So we should get the job title printed out. Oh,
What did you say title?
I didn't say title. That's a problem.
Wow, so okay, so it already creates a property inside our object that matches the name of the attribute.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So,
Remember title.
interesting. Job title. We might have to do that. Yep,
Nice.
because the dictionary.
It's a dictionary.
So what's confusing is the example had .object ID, which makes it seem like all of our attributes should be accessible through a dot method of getting them. But it's not so. .object ID just comes built into Parse. So if we actually want to access those fields, we just use a normal dictionary format.
That is kind of confusing.
How do they know that each row is job?
They don't. That's our thing, right? So
We're just labeling it that.
we're just labeling. So let's start from the very top down and going in order, right? So first step here is create our query, right? So just like with connections, just like with core data, we have to first either create a query or create a task, right? Same concept, create a task. Then we can filter before we make a call to either core data or NSURL session. Again, same concept. Enter your either predicate, which is your filtering mechanism, or your URL, right? Which is, again, kind of like a filtering mechanism for the web. Same concept. After we have all of our query options, all of our filtering mechanisms in our query, then we can perform the query. So this basically runs the query in the background. And if it comes back successfully, all of those results get stored under objects, and we can rename this. And basically, it's a conditional array of PF objects, right? Which is very similar to normal object. It gives us the same properties plus a few more. And then if we have an error, we get some kind of message here, and it's error. So again, same logic. If our error is nil, meaning if we didn't get an error back, we can start working with data, right? So we have access to our data through this objects array. Therefore, here we're going through each object in our object array and just temporarily using the jobs variable to unwrap it, right? So we're saying, hey, if our objects come back, and remember this is a conditional unwrap of optionals, right? So we're unwrapping it into jobs. We could have just done objects bang, or if objects do not equal nil, access objects, right? Multiple ways of doing it. So this way, we have objects are available, but it's not nil. We have this jobs now becomes our temporary store for objects. And then just like a normal array, we can iterate through all of our objects, through all of our jobs, the normal for loop. And here is where we can do stuff with that information. Right? So if we had a table view controller, we would here store this in either an array or in a model, and then the table view would access the model.
So if we wanted to like label the cells, then we could like say which number in the array we wanted to hit.
Yeah, so there's the tricky part is again, same problem we had with the Reddit exercise, right? The table view, because it's local, it will load instantly, and this would have to happen in the background if we reload, right? So we could either store this in our main namespace, and once this comes back successfully, store the data in our main namespace, and then reload our table, right? That way, it's a bit more familiar to us. Another way, I mean, you still have to go through this process, so you have to do this somewhere. If you're working with lots of data, it's super important to build your own class, right? Your own model, and then store all of this information in your own model so you can reference it, right? Remember? So we did students and core data. Same concept.
And that would be just a matter of passing that data.
Exactly. Yeah. So again, creating a shared instance for the shared instance, passing the information in an array in the shared instance. It'll be again a shared instance of an object of an array of PF objects like this.
So say we have a user that searches for a specific list of jobs. We would save that search.
Yep.
Into a new entity that we created in core data, and then that list is successful for the user with no connection.
Yep, exactly. Perfect. If we have an error, we can deal with the error over here. So you in your UI, you can present some kind of error message. So for the recalling information, I'm gonna leave this here for now. We'll go to the saving information next, where it'll be a bit more interactive. Do you guys have any questions on this so far? Super straightforward, right? And Parse does a really good job at walking us through this.
No, I was wondering why you were taking so long in teaching us the back end of it. I see why.
Yeah, it's important to understand that it's just a database. Again, if you ever get lost and like something doesn't make sense, remember it's just a database and it's all CRUD. Create, read, update, delete. So we have all the functionality just like with a normal database or Excel spreadsheet, whatever you want to label it as. Okay, So let's go back to our storyboard. And let's add a new view controller. And let's add a new file to manage this view controller, right? So Cocoa Touch class. And this will be the save jobs view controller. And we'll go through our usual exercise of tying up our view controller with our save jobs class. And just to keep things simple, I don't want to do auto layout today because of the interest of time. We'll just go in compact view. And here, let's add our fields so we can start testing this out. So we'll have a text field for everything. So we'll have a text field for title. And these will all have placeholders. Have a text field for city, state, salary, years experience, and then text view for description. And then a button to save. And then we'll change this to city, salary, years of experience. The text here will be job description. All right, and then let's go ahead and tie this up to our view, our controller. So title, city, state, salary, yelling at me. I think it's because we have a title property it's already used. So we'll have to break it in a second. Let's just finish this up, then I'll fix the title thing. So salary, experience, description. The title here, I'm just going to remove the connection since that namespace is already taken, and remove it from, son of a gun, description is also a keyword, can't use. So I'll call this job title. Job title. And I'll have to also break the description connection and remove that and drag and drop and name this job description. And then we'll have a save action. Save job action. Cool. And let's also make this our primary view controller. So just drag and drop the arrow here. And let's also import parse.
Just put this all into the one that's already there.
Huh? Because the one that's already there is going to be our read and query view controller. This is going to be our save view controller. So our admin interface.
Got it.
I'm going to run in the restroom. You guys finish this up. I'll be back in a second.
What do you call the action?
I don't know, call it save job. That is only weakness. My only weakness is that it's really bad. That's not if you name it.
Oh, really? Is he?
I think so.
What do you call them?
City text field. They,
Oh yeah.
He told us to do that. That's like the first couple classes.
Save job.
Because you can have a function that's save job.
Yeah.
This is backend for you. There's a already taking your function.
Oh, should have made that an outlet. I'm gonna get one of those peanut butter sandwiches.
Run this, make sure that there's no crazy errors. Ouch. Hmm. So I'm getting an error when I it's probably a let's see.
I absolutely no experience, but that happens to me when I link something twice. No view controller.
Yeah, could be. Let's see. Sales, the title, and description fields that are problematic here. Job title, job description. Are you guys able to run this?
Yes.
So it's a me problem. Save job. Sales is connected, connected. Pain in the butt. Be done with slowing this down. I might have to break my connection then. Sorry guys, give me a sec here. I think everything's I would have to recreate the whole thing.
Oh. That's the job description.
I hope it doesn't have to do with the project I imported. Yeah. This is frustrating. Yeah, I'm just gonna create a new view controller. And bear with me, guys, here. Still crashing. This is a pain in the ass.
So the way we can upload one of our projects that work and you can work on that.
Yeah, I could do that. Let me just try one more thing here. I think it's biting me in the ass importing the stupid starter project. I think it has to do with it's expecting the first UID controller.
See, this is what I like doing stuff like that.
If you guys don't mind dropping one of your projects in Slack, it might be faster than debugging this damn thing.
You can do that?
Looks like it's working here.
Looks like
I mean, I'm happy to do it, but you're gonna have to do it with an amazing UI.
I can deal with that. What the heck's going on?
how are you doing it?
I've never actually done this.
So compile the whole project folder. Or compress, rather.
Oh, like this? Like this?
Yeah, zip,
Oh,
exactly.
okay, cool. Can we airdrop it?
Can I drop it?
That's me.
It's you.
That's me. Where are you?
Might be easy to just drop it in Slack.
That was just the button. That's all. Sweet. I'll put it in the chat room. All right, 10%.
Curious what the heck is going on. Why? Cool.
So we need to change this to user key and everything. And then you load your
I do. Yeah. Good call. All right. Wait, I think you sent me the wrong one, Javi. You sent me the Objective-C one.
I parsed the whole thing. I sent the whole thing.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah, there's. Oh, okay, I see. Got it. Okay. All right. Storyboard. All right. So once again. All right, so save jobs view controller. All right, good to go. Okay, so let's go back into the documentation for parse. And we should see something under here for saving objects. So if you go to objects above queries, you can do saving objects.
Cool.
So let's take the block of code from saving objects, and we'll digest it in a second. And you import it. Make sure you import parse at the top of the controller. So the example they gave us is with this game score table, right? So we want this to be the jobs table. And instead of game score, we'll just make everything job.
I'm sorry, where do you find the code for saving?
So under objects, the saving objects block.
Okay. And you're putting that at the button, right?
Yep.
Inside the button.
Yep. Of course, if this were a real app, we want this to be in a model or someplace disconnected from the controller, right? So the fields we're going to be saving are exactly the fields that we have, the columns we have in our class here. So if you go back to the jobs, we have title. Let's go ahead and fill these out. We have city. We have state, and we'll change the values soon, not quite yet. State, we have description. We have salary and experience. Experience. And then we'll make the job a constant because we're not changing it, right? And then let's change all of those fields with the appropriate text fields we added. So we have self.job title. Or whatever you named it, right? The text. Self.city. The text. Self.state.text. And my Xcode keeps crashing. Self.job description. Text. Now, salary in our class name on parse is what kind of a type? It's a number, right? So our text fields are what type? Strings. So we have to convert to a number, right? So we'll do int self.salary.text. And same with experience, right? So convert this to an integer. Now we might have to run a quick test, but I think even if we feed it as a string, I think parse might be able to convert it for us, but we'll just try it as an int first. Again, these fields will be whatever you name them, right, in your outlets. And actually we'll say, if it's success, we'll say print successfully saved job. Error, we'll print there was an error. Script dev Arlington. Okay.
You're banging these. You have to put like this in this statement, right?
Yeah, so you have to check if there's text in there, right? So in our real application logic, we would have to check if the user has information there. And we have to make sure that if there are fields that are essential to storing in our database, then we require them. So we have right now the knowledge to require them, right? So if any of these fields are not filled out and we have the requirement to have them all fill out, then we shouldn't run this query, right?
How do you do like multiple if statements? So like if we want to say like if name not equal to nil, if
And
not equal
remember
to-
the double and. So if job, if self, the job title of the text does not equal that, and the double ends, remember? Yeah. Or actually, or is a better case there, right? Because if you want them all to be enabled, you want it to fail on all of them, right?
Okay.
So let's run this, test this out. Oh, dang it, I was already running it. Dev, Python, VA, 70, 5 years of experience. Say Node.js, jQuery, etc. Save. Successfully saved job. So if it's successfully saved and I refresh our data, we should see our job title here. Pretty awesome. So now everybody who has this app deployed will be able to pull these jobs, right?
And we already know how to do a query
Yep.
search.
Yep. So last piece is a user's piece. But before we jump there, let's quickly digest this to make sure that everything makes sense in our save logic. So what's happening here, guys, really quickly before we keep moving on, is before we talk to parse, before we save our information, we first create a local object, right? So we create a new object from the class BF object, right? This is very similar to, this is essentially a struct with the superpowers of the dictionary and a few other superpowers that parse gives us, right? So the way we fill out the information here for this object locally, before we save it, right? It's right now available for us to mutate locally, is just like a key value dictionary, right? And after we have all of our values, after we get all the inputs, we can then save, right? And again, same logic here, just like we have with an SRL session and core data. After the stuff gets saved, we then do something in this anonymous function here, right? Anyone remember the term for this? Yeah. It's called a closure. And a closure is essentially an anonymous function, right? A function we don't define, but it runs after a certain thing happens usually, right? It's usually a follow-up function. In JavaScript, they're called callbacks, right? So after you do something, you run another function as a callback. Many languages have closures, and they're super powerful, right? Those let us pass blocks of code around without having to define them ahead of time. How awesome is that? Isn't it easy?
It's so cool.
My favorite class.
Huh?
My favorite class in the sports session.
Right? Yeah. And it also makes it super easy. If you want, we'll go over creating and logging for users today. But they make it pretty easy to log in with Facebook and social networks.
How much did Facebook pay for this?
How much they pay for it? Oh gosh, I want to say it was two numbers jump in my head and they are drastically different. I think it was just over 1 billion, and the other number is actually sub 100 million. But I don't think it was a set letter. I think it was just over 1 billion. I think 1.1 or something. I'm sure you could on Google find it.
Can you look quickly? It didn't save. But
Yeah. Is it giving an error message on?
yeah, it's giving the error message that we set.
Let's see what's happening.
Here, like everything's fine. It's just that like the jump.
I think
So experience, this kind of solves my question. So experience, the point I made before, experience and salary, when we created columns and bars, there were what types?
There are numbers.
Numbers, right? So here are the strings. So that got some good integers.
Okay.
All right, are we ready for user registration and sign in?
Woohoo!
All right, so let's create another storyboard screen. And let's create a new file for this view controller. And this will be our user view controller. And then our storyboard will tie this in to our class, user view controller. We'll make this our starting screen. So let's very quickly, before we add fields, go to the documentation for users. So if you go back to our Parse tab, go to our users screen. Now, Parse has by default the username be required and the email be optional. We can override that. We won't go override it today. There's documentation of that. So we'll just go to defaults. So our bare minimums are username, password, email.
You can go into the database and change stuff.
Yeah. Now in production apps, you probably shouldn't do that, right?
Why?
Because if users are uploading data and you change their data,
Because you don't like that you talk to on a social networking app, you know. I'm very gassy. Put that all over the-
Imagine being single and like having created Tinder and like having every girl match you on Tinder. All right. Okay. So requirements are username, password, possibly email if you want. Okay. So here it gives us user sign up, right? So by default, if we look at this functionality that Parse gives us, by default, we have a convenience property in our user class, which is PF user, right? And PF user is a subclass of PF object, right? So when we're doing object queries, we have our PF object. This has all those properties, plus a few more convenience methods, and properties. So we don't have to do user and then do the normal dictionary format phone. It's got, just like the object has object ID, user by default has the username, password, email, convenience methods because of properties, because it assumes that most users will have those things, right? The rest of the logic is very similar in creation and updating. So let's start by first registration, and then we'll work with sign up or with login. So our users table right now has first, last, city, state. I don't want to worry about doing that work right now because you guys will know how to do that. I just want to worry with the login and the registration. You can add any fields you want later on. So in our user view controller, let's add these fields. So add a text field for username.
We can just copy the one, right?
What do you mean? No, you probably shouldn't,
Yeah.
because this got connections already. Password. Also add an email. Then let's add our button to register. You can do it later. I just want us to get through the logic of working with user sessions, because there's a couple of gotchas. Like what happens after you log in? You know, how do you check if the user's already logged in or not, right? So let's tie all this up. So username, password,
We import first.
import parts, of course. Email. Then we have a function to register user. Let's actually go crazy and another button for login. And we'll tie the button as well while we're here. So we should have something like this. Okay. And for the register user logic, let's go back to our documentation and just copy everything within the myMethod function, not the myMethod function itself, right? So import parse, of course. Okay, so username will be self username dot text self dot password dot text self dot email text. Okay, so let's see, what's the issue here? Okay. So let's also print some error messages here. Say print error string. So this is the error that comes back from us, right? So if you have an error, we'll just print this out. And then here, user created successfully. Now, let's also, in our storyboard, let's make this right. And for the password field, let's create this a type of password. Where's the type here?
Keyword type, no? Or no?
No, keyboard type. Appearance, no.
Secure text entry. It's the
Oh, thank you. Yeah. All right, cool. Delivery controller. Okay, so let's run this and see who can first create our user. Okay, so username is Teddy. Password is hello world. I'm very secure. Email teddy@gmail.com. So register. Successfully created. Let's go in our users database. And there's Teddy.
awesome.
How cool is that? Now, let's go back in our documentation. A few things to note is that our email and username have to be unique. So no username can be the same and no email can be the same. So if a user already exists with those, we'll get an error message back. So let's actually try this really quickly. While we have our app open, we'll do register again. And you see that we get the error message, and the error message is very expressive. It tells us that username is taken. So again, backend logic we don't have to worry about, right? Yeah, for the error, just printed the error string, right? So the error string just takes the error and then it comes back for us. All right.
Did you change the entry, right?
Can you show it?
Happy Thanksgiving. Teddy.
So yeah, happy Thanksgiving, man.
Can you show that again? You said that as, it's interesting. I'm getting an error for line 37 on your resume. So it says an error string, error to user error as in a string.
What's the error?
It's saying to user So I'm just saying to delete the question mark.
Oh, it's a typecasting thing, because this is pretty swift to put out.
Okay.
So one thing to note here is when we register, our method for the user was sign up in background. Now, for us to be able to change our user properties, we do .save, not sign up in background, right? So if the user has a user profile option, we can get the current user, and we'll go over that in a second, and change the properties just like we did with other objects, right? Unless it's one of these three. So when our user creates the current user, creates the account, we should be able to get something, we should be able to get a current user object. So let's see if we, after we log in, after we sign up, let's see if we have access to this current user. So actually in the, let's add 2 more buttons to our storyboard. Let's have one for sign out, and one button to check if logged in. So let's have our sign out action here. Let's set an action for check if user is logged in.
Did you just drag this entry point to the new screen?
Yep. And then in our check if user is logged in, let's quickly do a quick check. So print user is logged in. And then here we can also print out the user object, the current user object. And here we can do check if the user is not logged in. Make this let. So basically, over here, where again, you don't want to check if user is logged in by doing an action, right? This is what you want to do when every time somebody opens up your app, so you don't make them log in every time. Parse also, another cool thing it does, which we have to do ourselves, is it caches our user in our app, right? So after successfully logging in, it caches the login for us. So now, if I run my app, all right. Stupid. That's one more time. Okay, so check if user is logged in. And the user is logged in because we already signed up with them, right? How cool is that? And our user object has our user information, right? We have our email and the username, but you'll note that our user object does not have the password, right? So again, they've already thought of this for us. Again, stuff that we would have to do ourselves and it's taken weeks of work.
Why does the password not show up?
Because why would you want the password to show up? It's not secure, right? So now we could do stuff like, hey, if the user is logged in, right, we can make it from our app delegate. So our main screen is not this screen, but our main screen is our next screen, right? So when our user, if you want to check if our user gets logged in before when our app loads, this is the way to go about it. So again, in our app delegate, again, I can either give you guys an example, or it's very easy to Google to how to make the starting view controller a certain view controller. So in your app delegate, you would add this. You'd have it, hey, if the user is logged in, then make a certain view controller your starting view, right? Make the search your starting view. If it's not, then make the login screen your starting view, right?
All programmatic. There's no
All programmatically, yeah. But it's, again, it's 5 lines of code for us to do that. This caching, user caching thing is huge. I mean, this would have been a butt ton of work for us to do manually. Okay, so last one, let's quickly do the sign out so we can check the login.
And that's only because it's a user database, right?
For the what? What's
Like it wouldn't have that caching if we had chosen a custom database or something.
Yeah, so Parse has local caching actually. So remember we talked about, hey, what do we do if our apps don't have connection? How do we deal with that? We have to store and core data, right? Parse for queries that we've already done, it actually caches a lot of that. So again, out of the box, nice functionality. Not just for backend, but also for our iOS apps. Super powerful. Okay, so let's do a login, and then you guys can take it from here. I think you have a pretty good idea of how to work with documentation, right? Okay.
you're right. It's part of the
Oh, it's awesome. It's one of the best. Okay, so for the sign out, so we can test the other, we just do pfuser.logout. And let's do the login. So we'll take this functionality for the login. And the username will be self.username.text, self.passwords.text. Logged in. Now, again, for the login, if the user logs in, you programmatically go to a different view controller, right? So do present view controller method or perform segue view controller, right? And then if we have an error, we could say print error. All right. So let's test this baby out. So remember, we're logged in, so you have to first sign out. So I'll do a sign out. Check if logged in. We're not logged in, right? Our user option is empty. So let's log in. My username was Teddy. My password was hello world. Log in. Logged in, right? Check if user's logged in. We're logged in. So if I sign out and enter an incorrect password and do login, error, right? And now what's important here, and this is a general user experience, kind of nice to know, and not really a Parse thing, but Parse takes that into account, is when users are logging in with username and password, you don't want to tell them that username or password is wrong because they can brute force and they keep checking. If you just say, hey, your password is wrong, they at least know the username was right? So you want to tell them, hey, invalid login, try something else. So you don't want to direct them as to what could be wrong. Cool. Now, for next steps, one thing that will be useful for you guys, and we're not going to cover this today, is I would, as a next step, I would look at relationships. So relations. So basically, with relations, There's no, right now in this functionality, we don't need relationships, but in relations, you can say, hey, you can have jobs or favorites that belong to users. So users with many favorites. And documentation for this is also pretty clear.
Should we dabble a little bit with SQL before we start understanding relations? Do you recommend it?
Yeah, not with SQL. I mean, it's good to know on high level how they work. And remember, we did this last class as well. Relationships basically is you have a table, and say I have favorite jobs, right? So, favorite jobs, or user jobs, right? I basically have user ID, job ID. And for me to get favorite jobs for the user, I get all jobs for the user ID. But Parse makes it super easy. So in your jobs table, or your saved jobs table, basically you point a field to a user and field to a job, and it does it for you automatically. So read the relation section. It'll tell you to do that. Otherwise, just know at a high level that to be able to join things, you have to have a foreign key, like a reference ID for one of the things and the other thing, right? Be able to match them up. Now, if it's a relationship of the job will always belong to the user, so one of these will always be tied to the user, then here you just have a user ID without creating new database, right? But if you have a job that can be referenced to many users, then you create something. That's really the most complex you get to know as well.
Okay.
So it's one-to-many relationships or many-to-many relationships. And they talk about this there as well. All right, that's all I have for today.
Can you go real quick to the register code real quick?
Yeah.
Mine's not registering the new user. Okay, it's the same exact thing.
What's it saying? Do you have an error spinning up?
No error. It's just I'm not getting a new line in here. Like I refreshed it.
It's saying successfully saved.
Yeah.
Oh, make sure you sign up first before you register again.
What do you mean?
You sign up. Are you currently logged in? Did you sign up successfully?
Sign up successfully.
So can you click sign up first? See, make sure you have
The
nothing.
logout?
Yeah.
I didn't execute
Oh,
that.
that's okay. Let's try this then. Let's see what happens.
Oh, so wait. Should I log out then first?
No, let's try this out first. Then if it gives an error, we'll do that. Success. That's it.
Oh, what the hell? That's weird. Okay.
Thanks.
Okay.
I'm
One
gonna-
more asking a question about the homework.
Sure.
Okay. The only thing is with the second view controller where we're supposed to load from the settings bundle.
Yep.
So from what I can tell from what I found online,
Long time
is that
ago,
we're
I
actually
like
just
that was
supposed
one.
to
For what?
synchronize
It's
this
down.
with the end user defaults. And some
That's a great
couple people
goal.
online said that you're not supposed to actually read this out directly. Is that true?
Yeah,
So then that means all I did was in the app default was I just said, okay, I made a default array where I have settings name is equal to blank and settings file is equal to 5,
Okay.
right? And I mean, so
What's the visa problem?
and so
What's the visa concern?
in here, all I'm doing is I'm just getting the
They say that
user default for settings name and also the settings slider.
Like it works. Yeah, I don't know of anyone that's.
But it's like I I was confused
Where's
because,
your name?
right, so here it says,
Where's your
0
name
and
from? Like,
0.627.
Yeah.
I need to figure out how to make that only to one decimal
Do they
point, I
use
think.
them like that now?
But,
Let's go to the settings.
They tried Fort Lauderdale. They didn't like it.
and sometimes it's blank in
They
here,
didn't like it?
and I don't know why.
I guess
Fort Lauderdale.
So I'm going to
I'm gonna
close
try that.
this.
I want to try to buy something down there.
Could be all of it.
But like, just so they can also go down there for a month
Yeah.
or two a year and see if they like it better down there.
Nice. My stepbrother actually lives in Fort Lauderdale. So
Oh,
it's
yeah?
the time, yeah.
How did you go down there?
So it updates.
Yeah.
I mean, it does what it's supposed to
Yeah.
do.
My family lives-
But I was just surprised because I for the longest time, I was like trying to loop through the entire
Fort Lauderdale.
Bundle,
file,
yes.
and then I couldn't get the default. I was trying to get the default value
Yeah.
of like the whatever the thing was.
Yeah. So that's exactly right. There's another method of doing it, which is kind of similar to that.
Yeah.
I'll post that answer up, but that's the method you should always. I usually set the default
Just like
there
that. Okay.
because you've got to set it first as a default for going to your settings to access it.
All right. So then I'm going to delete all that crap, and okay, now I'm just
I,
going to
I'll
update my homework.
How do you know now?
I've been wanting to go somewhere.
All right. Nice.
No, but it's not a safe choice.
Nice choice.
I'm gonna have to.
It's really extremely
Rewatch this.
I think it's the
Five thing?
You're right.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to live.
And at some point, we'll also have to talk about your project. So I'm a bit worried about the live video thing. You gotta find a library that you can use for that.
For live video.
Yeah.
Okay. That's for the debate thing.
Yeah.